The ideology that is poisoning the well seems to be spreading and growing, and I think it is a philosophy of death.
Hey, this is Miguel Sanchez, and I'm going to be reviewing the Warrior Post Society's video of mob rule and the destruction of everything. So, I'm looking into this video because of the fact that he said so many things that I think are not helpful to anybody. He really usually has an open mind to people that he thinks are open and receptive. But now that I'm looking at this video, I feel like it's an actual jagged move away from his character. Because normally he's really receptive, and now here you see him and it's all about getting the band together for war. You know, that's it. It's not about talking anymore. It's not about understanding anybody. It's about viewing them as the enemy.
A lot of you have a very bleak view on where our country is headed. Some of you envision some doomsday dystopian future that looks a lot like this. Still others, something like this. I think this one, that's obviously going to be the winner right there.
It's not for this council to play God.
Who says politics is boring?
And maybe even something like this. All right, the last one was ridiculous. As for me, I really do think some dark...
Straight up, most people think that the apocalypse is going to be something where all society collapses and they all think they're going to be the hero. That's the number one thing that I always get from people, is that they think they're going to be the protagonist of the story. They're going to be the good person. They're going to be the person who is untouchable, just like anybody who goes off to war. You're probably not going to be. You're probably going to die. If it's the real apocalypse, you're probably going to die first. You are. You know what I'm saying? You, who's looking at the camera, you're going to die first. Just keep that in mind, and that's how you play the long game. That's how you survive, by thinking you're going to die first.
I really do think we're headed towards some really, really dark days. And so I want to be prepared, but I also want to do everything I can to pump the brakes before we just drive over a precipice. I came across a quote, and you guys have got to hear it. It's more than a quote. It's kind of like a little bit of a story, and you'll like it. I know some of you are anti-reading because movies like Avengers exist now, and so books are old. So hang with me. I promise the payoff is worth it. Here we go. This is by a dude named G.K. Chesterton. Ugly as a troll, but the man's brain was incredible. So here we go. Suppose that a great commotion arises in the street about something, let us say a lamp post, which many influential persons desire to pull down. A gray-clad monk, who is the spirit of the Middle Ages, is approached upon the matter, and he begins to say in the arid manner of schoolmen, "Let us first consider, my brethren, the value of light. If light be in of itself good," and at this point, he is somewhat excusably knocked down. All the people make a rush for the lamppost, and the lamppost is...
See, I like that analogy. I do like the light post story. The only thing I don't feel like it captures is what is the light? You know what I mean? I really like the analogy by itself, but I hate how everybody will take that as an excuse to put up their own light as the thing.
Is down in 10 minutes. And they go about congratulating each other in their unmedieval practicality. But as things go on, things don't work out so easily. Some people have pulled the lamppost down because they wanted the electric light. Some because they wanted an old iron light. Some because they wanted darkness because their deeds were evil. Some thought it not enough of a lamppost. Some too much of one. Some acted because they wanted to smash municipal machinery, and some because they wanted to smash something. And there's war in the night, no man knowing whom he strikes. So gradually and inevitably, today, tomorrow, or the next day, there comes back the conviction the monk was right after all, and all that depends on what is the philosophy of light. Only what we might have discussed under the gas lamp, we now must discuss in the dark. There's a war of different ideas out there. You believe something, I believe something a little bit different, or maybe it's very, very different. But what's a really, really good and positive thing is something that's guaranteed by our Constitution, the freedom of speech, that I can say my ideas, regardless of how horrible they sound to you, and you can say yours as well. And the government is not allowed to shut us down. We're allowed to speak our piece as we see it, both in the matters of politics and religion and all that stuff. And that's a good thing. Now, it also requires a certain amount of maturity in that hopefully there's some semblance of that little kid in me that was taught that sticks and stones may break.
Yo, the fact about sensitivity, this is where I think the generalizations start and where I think he weakens, like in his argument. Because what you're sensitive about, just being sensitive in and of itself isn't a bad thing at all. Yeah? If you're sensitive to causes that are just, I mean, yo, go for it, right? If you want to protect everybody and you're sensitive because you think about somebody getting raped and it really gets you going and you want to defend against that, that kind of sensitivity is perfectly fine. People getting sensitive about words and just labels and, you know, those people who are just like, hey, man, I don't want any labels, man. You know? Like, I get that. You know? Hey, you know? Where they haven't dealt with anything. And it's just a complaint. Like, I understand. File your complaints. There's no problem in that. But if it's just a complaint with no kind of basis of how you want to better the world, yeah, get out of here. You know? But sometimes sensitivity comes from being so jagged, from having been hurt for so much, that it's not the baby skin of somebody who hasn't gone through anything. It's the open wound of someone who's constantly being pressured towards that edge, being prodded and poked, and not understood and not talked to. Huh? That kind of sensitivity is part of the core of what we need to maintain view of, and not generalize on everybody who cancels anybody is the problem. Because no, sometimes those cancellations are just. They brought out attention to this guy who raped. Get him out. They brought attention to this guy who's a criminal. Get him out. They brought attention to this guy who says just racist things. Yeah? Why would you not call that out? Why would you not be sensitive to that? It's about being reasonable and not painting with such a broad brush. This is one of the parts where I think he failed the most, is you're painting with such a broad brush that everybody who could be on your side in the middle like me has to now step in and say, no, I agree with you. But now we got to have a discussion about the nuance. Yeah? And actually call out the people who are messing up and not paint everybody who cancels like a broad brush. And saying that everybody's just sensitive. No. There's a sect that's sensitive because they haven't gone through anything. They want the world to be the way they want it to be. Then there are people who have open wounds, who just, where it's just obvious how much hurt they've got. And they're wondering, why doesn't anybody care or listen? It's the same people who voted for Trump who are thinking, man, he's the only person that came to me and promised me things that I wanted to hear. I've been ignored this whole time. Let me go with this guy. Some of them did that. Obviously, some were racist. Yeah? Obviously. Some were sexist, didn't want a woman president. Some. Yeah? But a lot also went because he was a guy who promised to listen. So I just think we got to take that into consideration. We got to separate the groups and actually go fix the problem. Be a doctor. Actually diagnose somebody's actual problem and then go to that. Not discard the whole patient. Come on, man.
Break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But now we've become so pathetically weak as a culture and as individuals that words and microaggressions and hate speech can so utterly crush someone that they find it justifiable to literally cancel other people, to shut down their opinions, to ban them and to censor them because their ideas are far too hard for them to cope with. What it means is that we have become so weak that we need safe spaces. We need the whole world to become far more sensitive because our delicate constitutions are so terribly weak, we can't actually survive. Now, to many of you, that's going to sound harsh, but just as a guy who just really loves history, I can look back on all the centuries before us and be like, man, it is just a war to stay alive, to survive. And most of the world knows that struggle where they're farming hard with early days and working.
Again, those exaggerations. It's not a poison within. There's a couple people who are yelling and being pansies, huh? And then there's a group who are saying, I'm in pain. Listen to me. We've got problems. Look at me. Huh? And all we do is say, you're all the same. There's a couple people who just want to take control and have the world the way they want to be. Huh? And then there are some who are just asking to be listened to. Please do something about these problems that are in my society. Please treat us like we're part of America. Please. The generalizations are what hurt. It's what makes tribes. It's what makes us separate from each other. This kind of talk right here.
Late until the sun drops and just collapsing in exhaustion, hoping that your village doesn't get raided and your property.
Look, he just said the public discourse is breaking down and it affects everybody. At the same time, he was just calling everybody weak and pansies and, too hurt and the poison inside and, and you wonder, why don't they talk to me? Why is the public discourse breaking down? Maybe because you're not really bringing up any specific things that we can work on. Instead of calling everybody pansies this, maybe actually listening to some of the people who are like, oh, okay, gotcha. Part of the reason why we're taking down statues is because this person raped my grandma. Why would I want to live in a city or be in a street that's named after the guy who raped my grandma? Maybe I don't want to be there. Maybe I want to rename it to somebody who was actually working with unity. Yeah? A white leader, a black leader, somebody who was actually trying to unify.
Plundered and your wives raped and your children killed. And I'm not exaggerating. That's the ancient world. That's the Middle Ages. That's up through the birth of the nations and the warring among nations. The bloodiest century of all time was the 20th century, and yet us in the United States, we sit protected by vast oceans and the greatest military the world's ever seen and an immense prosperity. And so we have the time, the wealth, and the security to imagine the world as a really, really safe place. So what we have is forces without, and we have this crippling poison within that's weak.
There you go. Another generalization. Destroying anything that looks traditional and historical. Once again, what a broad brush. Can your brush get any broader? Do you just see that? Maybe that's all you heard? And that's part of the reason, that's part of the problem. That all we hear is the most extreme versions of everything. There are so many people taking down those statues or renaming streets or doing this because, yes, they did this good thing. Amazing, thank you for doing that. But you also enslaved my people. You also had a great grandma, cleaning out your bathroom, not paying her. You also beat data, You also did these extreme things. So, in the light of both sides of you, because as a complete person, I'm seeing the good you did for your civilization, your community, your people, and then also, the bad things you also did. I don't want you in the plaza, in the public plaza. And as a part of the public, that person can say that, can put down that complaint and say, I understand you guys put it up there because he was great to you. Do you not feel their pain? Like if you had to live, if you have family, something terrible happened to them And the person who caused that terrible tragedy, they just rename that street where you're living on and put his name on it. There's something to that feeling that I would feel about maybe like, hey, maybe don't put him in my space because he did this terrible thing, and it kind of hurts that you don't think about it, that you just don't care. At least admitting that our parents got some things right. Of course. Almost everybody says that. But if you listen to the extremes, then you don't see it. That 1% on that side who is just screaming to vandalize. Huh? But if you look at the other 99% that are saying, hey, we just don't want that guy who did those bad things to my family venerated like that. Let's put him in a museum. Then all of a sudden, that radical extremist who's yelling those things out and him are agreeing. Maybe the reality is way closer to unity than people are painted out to be. Because extremism makes money.
It up. Now, people have spent their lives in the past and all of their brilliance and all their imagination surviving to pass on some age-old principles. And I get that the day and age right now, we want progress and progressivism. And it's a good thing to look on the sins of the past.
No. John sounds completely reasonable. Yeah? But what I'm trying to say is almost everybody is completely reasonable. Almost everybody. So if we're just being fed the extremes, how can we not see that? How can we not see that most people are reasonable? And I wonder if someone explained it to him and said, hey, I want to rename that street because I don't know if you knew, but that guy also enslaved X and also hurt Y and forced Z to do these things. So, because it hurt me personally, I want to take it down. I want to change it to something that could be in between us, something unifying. I think he would agree. But the fact is, that kind of news doesn't get to people. And I wonder why. Ooh, the why is the most important thing. Because if that street name is being changed and the why is because that person has two sides of their personality, and on one side he was really good to one culture, and then on the other side he actually hurt these people, did these kind of bad things, and maybe I don't want him on the street corner where my kids play because they hurt us personally or X thing, then that's a strong why. And if you look at that statue and say, hey, you know what? He did good things and bad things. How about we instead take it out from the public plaza, put him in a museum so that people can learn about him, or put him more into the history books, teach more in history in schools? Why don't we do that? And it worries me because of the fact that in the South, there has been the Daughters of the Revolution or Daughters of the Southern States, where they actually did petition to go and change textbooks about slavery and about the war. And there are so many people that really just deny that slavery had anything to do with the Civil War. Spend more time looking at the why and listening.
But it's the craziness that's pushed me to be like, all right, our grandparents and our parents and our forebears, they actually had some really good points about some stuff. All this reminds me of a George Orwell quote, and this was in his seminal work, 1984, written many, many decades ago. So when you hear this quote, you're going to be thinking, oh, that's somebody written today about now. And I'm like, no, this is someone who called the ball looking forward and seeing the landscape. Let me see if I can remember it. I've memorized the quote. Every record has been destroyed or falsified. Every book has been rewritten.
Do you want their deeds acknowledged? Just the good or all of them?
Every picture has been repainted. Every statue and every street building has been renamed. Every record has been altered. And it's been continuing like this, day to day, minute by minute. History has stopped. All that exists is a never-ending present in which the party is always right. I know I missed a couple words in there, but it's from memory, and I memorized the quote because I felt like, man, that nails today more than ever, because there is an ideology that wants to literally rip down and destroy our statues, that wants to look back in history, and whether it's our founders or it's other people that have been elevated by people at the times and people after them and said, hey, these folks had a great contribution. But now when we look back, we just know one or two kind of words as racist or whatever, and we ascribe to them, and we don't really know or acknowledge any of the good contributions. And so when you feel yourself of looking back of like, how could they possibly look up to that person? Well, if you don't know the answer, it's because history has been removed and rewritten for you. And all that exists is the ideological party right now, that party line, that this person is evil. What's happened is propaganda. The statues are being taken down. History is being rewritten. And if you can, as Karl Marx would say, the first battleground is the rewriting of history. And what he says is that the only way we can change our identity of the people now is to rewrite the past. And then you can rewrite the present however you want. That's why Orwell also would point it out. He who controls the past controls the future.
Look at that. Tribes. He himself, because he doesn't know what to do, he's pulling himself into a trap. And you can see it, his indecisiveness, not knowing what to do. I don't know what to do. Public discourse is breaking down. Let me go back to my people. You see it. If public discourse is breaking down, the obvious thing you do is set up town meetings, set up meetings, set up interviews, talk, explanations, breakdowns, talk to historians, talk to people who know, the leaders of the community, and create those public discourse. But when you're afraid, but when you're indecisive, when you feel overwhelmed, that's when it gets you. That's when the fear gets you.
And he who controls the present controls the past. Folks, listen to me. I get that progress is a good thing. I like progress. But if we destroy all the tradition and the history that came before us, we lose identity in the present, and everything is going to be destroyed. You can't possibly remove the foundation of a building without the entire building falling in and of itself. Guys, I would love to be able to say, and this is what we do about it, but I'm watching all this play out and everyone just seems so pissed. The public discourse is breaking down where you have this war against anything that's old and traditional. Anything established that was good in the past is now being rewritten and dismissed in the name of progress. It's leftism ideology destroying everything. I don't know what in the world to do about it, but I do know that if we can't see it clearly for what it is and hold on to the values that can kind of anchor us as well of God, family, culture, doing what's right, standing up to mobs and being bold and courageous and loving protectors. In effect, our entire warrior poet society is a declaration against the destruction of everything as we rally together as fellow poets wanting to be forces for good in a world that seems on fire. And that.
Whew, fuck. I really think he's afraid. I really think it's afraid and it's clouding his vision, you know? Because I agree with him completely about the working as an individual to rise all tides, and you as an individual, if you get better, you help out the other people around you, yeah? But it really feels like he's devolving into tribalism, and it really looks like he drank every sip of the extremism that they gave him to say, hey, look at this extremist. Hey, look at this extremist. The why, we don't know. They have no why. Huh? They just are. Huh? And he's collecting other people around him into this panic to say, prepare yourselves, because everything out there is ugly and evil. And it really is obvious when you feel comfortable, you can look through those things and say, oh, that person is exaggerating. But when you start to feel a little uncomfortable, like if I start feeling uncomfortable, if I start feeling scared, everything looks like a nail and I got a hammer. Right? But both sides fail to see the why. They never get to see the why, and it's sad because you got the internet, you got people who are reasonable out there talking about it. Kyle Kalinske in Secular Talk, yeah, one of the great ones. Jimmy Dore, great one. These people who just try to be honest or just try to see things in the middle and ask why of both sides. We need more of those people. Yeah. Man, I love this guy.